Hello everyone and welcome to StudyTravel TV Live, a show of news, statistics and opinion. I'm Nicola Hancock, editor of StudyTravel Magazine.
Hello everyone, I'm Bethan Norris, senior editor of StudyTravel Magazine. Before we get started, for the best viewing experience, please put the call in side-by-side speaker view. You will see an icon in the top right corner where you can select the view.
We are delighted to welcome you all today to this episode of StudyTravel TV Live. In today's broadcast, we'll start with a news story and then we'll be joined by our guest this week, Eren Goker, President of UED, and Jonathan Swindell, Chief Executive of Quality English.
If you have any questions for the presenters or guest speakers or comments on the stories, please post them in the chat box and we will read them out at the end. A big thank you to our sponsor of this episode, Falca.
Okay, let's take a look at our first story. The Government of Canada has announced an 18-month extension of post-graduation work permits, or PGWP, for former international students with expired or expiring permits.
Sean Fraser, Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship, IRCC, announced the measures to support employers facing challenges in recruiting and retaining employees. From April the 6th, 2023, PGWP holders who wish to stay longer will be able to opt into a process to extend their work permit.
Minister Fraser said that Canada needed to use every tool in its toolbox to support employers who continue to face challenges in hiring the workers they need to grow. He added that international graduates whose work permit is expiring or has expired were being given additional time to stay in Canada to gain valuable work experience and potentially qualify to become a permanent resident.
Those with expired permits will be able to restore status even if they are beyond the 90-day restoration period and will receive an interim work authorisation while awaiting processing of the new work permit application. At the end of 2022, more than 286,000 international graduates were in Canada with a valid PGWP, according to IRCC data, and almost 95,000 former international students transitioned to permanent residency last year.
Last October, IRCC also announced that the part-time work limit was temporarily lifted for international students who were already in the country or who had already applied at that point.
So at this point, we'd like to welcome our guests this week, Eren and Jonathan. Welcome to STtv Live.
Thank you very much.
And let's get straight into some questions. We'll start with you first, Jonathan. We talked in our most recent episode of STtv Live about the apparent competition between Australia and Canada to offer more and more work rights to international students, thereby making these destinations attractive to international students. Quality English has 10 members offering language and vocational programs in Canada and 1 member in Australia. Do you think initiatives such as these will give these destinations the competitive edge over others such as the UK and USA, even for language students?
Well, work rights are always an attractive benefit to language students, whether it's 10 hours per week or 20. So it clearly does give them a competitive advantage over the UK and the US. And it certainly has benefited our schools in Canada in particular, and especially those who are offering vocational courses. But actually, the availability of work rights might actually increase the number of people looking for that type of course, rather than have a detrimental effect on the UK or the US.
Thank you. And Jonathan, which international student markets are gaining the most ground in terms of post-pandemic recruitment, according to your members? And what challenges are still holding back further growth, do you think?
Well, a lot of our schools have actually been pleasantly surprised by the variety of markets that have emerged or re-emerged since the pandemic, which has allowed to maintain their excellent nationality mix. Europe has been particularly strong post-pandemic, but actually recently we've heard a lot about Kazakhstan and Mongolia, so we're looking into those markets as well. But as we have schools in 7 different countries and some markets emerge more for some destinations than others, it is quite difficult to kind of generalize. I'd say in terms of challenges, one of the biggest challenges can be visa processing or visa refusals. For example, we've heard that visas for Turkish students have often been quite slow, and there have been a number of refusals.
Okay, and Eren, according to our most recent agency survey on Turkey, Canada was the top destination for Turkish language students in 2021, overtaking the UK, which was top in 2020. Are increased work rights an important consideration for Turkish students, do you think?
Obviously, yes. I mean, increasing work rights and post-study work permit is an extremely important tool for international students from Turkey traveling overseas on making decision about the destination. The number of students going to Canada is increasing even during the pandemic and after the pandemic, because the Canadian embassy has done a great work and they didn't close down their office and they were open and they were communicating with the agencies. So we keep on enrolling new students, and the number of applications to Canadian language providers has been increased more than 25-30% every quarter. So that make a lot of students went to Canada, and some of them did not obviously obey the visa regulations, and that is causing the refusals at the moment. But work right is an important tool for our students. This is extremely important during their studies and after their graduation.
Thanks, Eren. And again, according to an agency survey we conducted in 2018, Australia was the second most popular destination for Turkish language students after the UK, attracting 25% of students that year. Obviously, with Australia's border being closed for 2 years, Turkish students have had to look elsewhere. So have you seen any signs that Australia is regaining its popularity with the Turkish market since it reopened?
Yes, I mean, this is related with the work rights again. Australia has been offering part-time work options for international students. That's why it was extremely popular. We had a lot of inquiries for Australia. And last year, when they opened up the borders, we had a huge demand for Australia. I know some agencies has obtained 30-40 visas a week. But by the end of November 2022, we start getting refusals. Again, some students did not obey the visa regulations, and that affected. At the moment, visa regime for Australia is not that much easy. It is about 50% approval rate, 50% visa refusals. But again, I believe it's going to pick up because there is a strong demand to study in Australia by Turkish students, not only with ELICOS providers, for also higher education and post-secondary providers as well.
Great, thank you.
And was there a problem with visas for Australia and Turkish students at the end of last year?
Australia has a good tracking system of students. What Australian government is able to track what the student is doing after their visa expired. I mean, if the student has not re-enrolled to another provider and just hanging around and continue working, where the job market is quite up at the moment, that makes student unlawful over there. The student lost their international status. So this is a kind of this is a result of not obeying the visa regime. So they are abusing the visa. For this reason, Australian government is becoming more and more careful. At the moment, all visas issued to Australia for study purposes are issued in Western Australia. Traditionally, it was the Ankara embassy was issuing the embassy in Ankara was issuing the visas, and they used the local staff who is extremely experienced about clarifying the students' needs and understanding the students' financial backgrounds and can estimate if the student will obey the visa or not. But the of onshore visa processing in Australia, the staff is not very qualified for visa processing. So they sometimes make mistakes and they approve visas that shouldn't be approved.
Okay, thank you. And let's move on now to our next story. The UK is launching its new electronic travel authorization, or ETA scheme, later this year, initially for visitors from Qatar before expansion worldwide.
Visitors from Qatar will be able to apply for an ETA from October, followed by those from the Gulf Cooperation Council, or GCC, states and Jordan from February 2024, replacing the electronic visa waiver scheme for those countries.
By the end of 2024, the ETA will be a requirement for all visitors who do not currently need to make any application to visit the UK, including those from Europe, Argentina, Brazil, Chile, Japan, Mexico, and South Korea.
The cost of an ETA has not yet been announced, but the Home Office said that it would be in line with similar international schemes, such as those operated by Canada and the USA, and that individuals will be able to make multiple visits of up to 6 months over the 2-year validity period of an ETA.
In other UK visa developments, the UK Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, has recently held meetings with Emmanuel Macron, the President of France, during which both leaders committed to making it easier for school groups on organised trips to travel to the UK. Since October 2021 and the UK's withdrawal from the EU List of Travellers scheme, EU juniors have not been permitted to travel to the UK on ID cards as they previously could.
International Education and Tourism Associations have called for a replacement scheme in recognition of the importance of this group travel segment from Europe, and have highlighted that many European juniors do not possess passports, that some non-EU students resident in EU countries may require a visa to enter the UK, and that some countries would legally not be able to exclude such students on funded trips.
So, Jonathan, let's go to you first. What difference do you think the ETA requirement will have on international students coming to the UK for short-term language programs?
Well, actually, I visited some of our schools in the US and Canada just last month, and I have to say the ETA system is very quick, cheap, and efficient. Only costs about $10, and in fact, with the Canadian one, I managed to complete it the day before, having forgotten I needed to do it. But no, it does work very well. So if potentially the ETA system could be used in some way to make it easier for EU students to come to the UK, perhaps even those with ID cards instead of passports, then clearly it will have a positive impact.
Okay, that would be good news. And Jonathan, again, going back to the junior sector, which is a massive one for UK language schools, has Quality English been involved in any lobbying efforts regarding children being able to travel to the UK without passports from Europe? And what effect has this post-Brexit passport requirement had on the junior market for UK language schools?
Well, we're not a political body. We leave lobbying to the likes of English UK, English USA, Languages Canada, Feltham, and so on. And with schools in 7 different countries, clearly we can't lobby on everyone's behalf. In terms of the passport requirement, I think it's clearly had a slightly negative effect, but from speaking to some of our schools, perhaps not as bad as one would have thought. Most students either seem to have a passport, which goes against something that was just reported, or they're very willing to purchase one because it's only costing €100 per person. And if they're studying for travel, then this isn't a huge amount of money in the bigger scheme of things.
Thank you. Eren, Turkish nationals require a visa to enter the UK. So have UED members reported any problems with UK visa applications post-COVID?
I mean, not only UK, we need visa to go everywhere technically. And we are very familiar with the passport and the visa issues. So it is not something very new for us, not something strange for us. All the families before coming to an education consultancy, they get their children's passport first of all. And the there has been visa delays with the UK. That was mainly for the short-term language school visas. Especially last summer, we had difficult times. That is mainly due to recently employed entry clearance officers in UK. As you can imagine, during the pandemic, there were some people lost their jobs and they need more staff. And the recently employed entry clearance officer doesn't have enough information to evaluate the student visas. We got refusals saying that your student's father has too much money. And we have refusal letters saying that, why don't you learn English in Istanbul while you are coming to London? So these refusals technically show that the entry clearance officer were not very well informed about why an international student travels to London to learn language. But this year, I believe things will get much better. At the moment, visa approval rate for UK is extremely good. I would say it reached up to 70%. I think before the summer, it will go up to 90-95% again.
Great. Yeah, the latest statistics actually from English UK show that Turkey was in the top 5 source countries for the UK in the last quarter of 2022. So do you think the UK will be back up on top as a destination for Turkish students this year?
Of course, definitely. Improving visa processing times from 9 weeks to 5 weeks helped a lot. And I think it will continue to drop down to 3 or 2 weeks. That will definitely increase. But other missing tool here is the part-time work right option. Students can go to Ireland and work part-time. Turkish students do it quite a lot. Turkish students go to Australia and work part-time. But UK, they can only spend money. So if the UK government can implement a way of allowing international students to work part-time, the number of students will boom. I mean, UK will become the first market for us. But at the moment, without work right, the numbers are picking up, but not as good as we estimated or we wish, let's say.
Okay, thank you. And we know that last year Turkish agents and students experienced large visa delays for Ireland. Has this situation resolved itself? And do you see any future problems this year for visas for Ireland or any other country?
I mean, this problem has solved out thanks to Irish Embassy, Department of Immigration, and our colleagues in Ireland. They have forced quite a lot, and the number of staff at the Irish Embassy processing visa numbers has tripled. So the moment, I mean, last year it was like 25 weeks to 24 weeks to get a reply. At the moment, it dropped down to 4 weeks. And the Irish Embassy is really trying to do their best to keep it 4 weeks, and 4 weeks is extremely reasonable timing. And we recently had a meeting with Irish Embassy, a Zoom meeting with Irish Embassy and UAD members, and they said that they are going to keep on this 4 weeks and trying to reduce it. And even during the summer, they will prioritize applications. So at the moment, Ireland seems to be going to be the first destination for our Turkish students for long-term studies, 25 weeks and over. And I don't think there will be delays. And for the other countries, there are small issues with the visas, but the main problem here is the US visas. Unfortunately, to get a visa appointment for US, you need to wait until May 2024 at the moment, which is 1 year ahead. And none of the language school students obviously wait for that long. And hopefully, things will get much better, and the visa processing times, waiting times, let's say, visa appointment waiting times for US will improve, and that will definitely help our numbers to grow for the US, and Turkey can still be back in the US market. But Ireland, I believe they are going to be extremely popular the rest of the year.
Thanks, Eren. That's some great insight there. Okay, let's take a look at our next story. BPP University has selected Oxford International Education Services, a new recruitment services division of Oxford International Education Group, as a partner to help expand and diversify its pipeline of international student talent.
The partnership will allow BPP University to reach a wide array of international students with a specific focus on recruiting from sub-Saharan Africa, Asia Pacific, and the Middle East.
Oxford International will help expand international recruitment through the organisation's global recruitment team of more than 100 staff members in over 50 locations.
And through this new initiative, BPP University said that the organisation aims to grow international student intake by 30%, equating to 2,500 students within 12 months from launch.
According to Oxford International, the organisation will also offer tailored on-the-ground support and infrastructure to international students throughout the recruitment process.
So, Eren, we'll start with you. What do you think this partnership actually means for agencies such as yours?
First of all, I would like to congratulate both university and Oxford International for the partnership. It's an excellent match, I believe. It's going to be very productive. From the agent side, it is important because higher education is the future of our business in Turkey. More and more agencies want to enter higher education, and signing up agreement with the UK university is not that much easy. You need to go through a lot of processes. This partnership will allow Turkish agencies to enroll more higher education students to BPP without having an agreement, without establishing an agreement with the university. And also it will skip a lot of bureaucratic issues. And higher education providers like Oxford International, they develop programs that called integrated master, where the student combines their English language program with a higher education program that allows them to obtain just one visa for the whole duration of their stay. That also saves quite a lot of money for the student and a lot of money for a lot of timing for the agency. So this partnership will be very fruitful for both parties. And Oxford International has a huge experience with working with the universities. So BPP is a well-known university in this field. I think it's going to be a good opportunity for agencies to send more students.
Okay, thank you. And do you think the goal of increasing their international student intake by 2,500, do you think that's achievable? Do you think that's something you can see happening?
To be honest, it's a bit aggressive target, but it is not impossible. Both parties have to understand their roles clearly and should expect the industry's expectations. From one side, a university, usually they are very strict about entry requirement, processing times, and they don't understand that international students don't want to wait quite a lot. They want to get a result for their application quite soon. From the Oxford International part, they need to guide the university how to develop their admission process so they can convert inquiries into enrollment as soon as possible. If they can do this, yes, it will be very productive for both sides and the target can be reached. But again, if one side doesn't catch up the other part, it will be difficult to catch up these targets. But this is a very aggressive target, to be honest.
Okay.
Thank you. And Jonathan, to you, Kaplan has done something similar recently, collaborating with the University of Victoria in Canada to recruit international students for them. So what are your thoughts on collaborations like this?
Well, obviously, these are large organizations. Kaplan and Oxford International have wide reaches, so it makes sense for universities like this to partner up with them. But from our perspective, the scale of it is a bit irrelevant to our particular sector. Although our schools do have links to universities themselves and offer pathway courses, it's nothing on the scale of this.
No, quite right. And we'll ask you about some new courses and developments, perhaps that if you've noticed among your QE language school members since the end of the global pandemic. Can you tell us anything about that?
Yeah, so I mean, our Irish and Maltese schools have benefited from Brexit in that they've seen an increased demand for Erasmus Plus courses, and we at Quality English have been supporting various projects about this. Generally speaking, adult students are looking for something a bit wider than just general English now, something with a strong academic focus, exam courses, preparation courses, even subjects like sustainability, so that they can take more away from their course than just the English language. And all of this, I think, ties in quite nicely to what we were saying earlier about how students do want a clear pathway towards their academic and life goals. And even some of the juniors are a bit more focused and demanding in what they expect from course subjects. But luckily, Quality English schools are nimble and flexible enough to adapt to these changing demands.
Okay, and you mentioned that some of your members do have agreements with universities. Is that a sort of increasing trend, do you think? Is that something that will increase in the next few years?
I think, yeah, like I say, many of them do have those links and many of them do offer their own pathway programs. And I think, like we've been saying, it's important to have, for some students, to have that clear route through into higher education. But again, I think this demographic only makes up a small percentage of language students. So I wouldn't say it's a really burning issue for a lot of our schools at the moment.
Okay, thank you. And that brings us up to date with all the stories this week. At this point, we'll open up to the audience to see if there are any questions for our guests or for the StudyTravel team. These can be on any of the stories or topics we have discussed.
So whilst we're waiting for any questions from the floor, Jonathan, you're celebrating, or rather Quality English is celebrating a very important milestone anniversary this year, 20th. Can you tell us what plans you have to celebrate?
Yes, yeah, 20 years of Quality English this year. In fact, it was back in January would have been the actual date, but we've got various things lined up, various occasions to celebrate. In particular, on the 24th of November, we're hosting a Madrid mission, which will be a regular QE agent workshop, but plus a Quality English conference the day before, and a gala dinner on the night of the workshop. So we look forward to seeing a lot of our schools there, and a lot of our agent partners as well, not just from Spain, but from all over.
Okay, I can't see any questions, but Eren, I've got a question for you. Obviously, everybody is aware that Turkey suffered a very devastating earthquake recently. How has that affected your agency members, and how are things recovering in Turkey?
Our members, we have one member living in Gaziantep. She was affected also, but she's now handling the aids for the victims. There has been some sub offices over there. They can't use the sub offices. They move their stuff to nearest safe cities. Of course, the earthquake has been, it's been like 40 or 45 days since the earthquake has happened. It was far away from Istanbul. We didn't feel it, but we saw what's going on television. People are affected, to be honest. People are affected, but this is something we need to live with it. I mean, we can't change the nature.
Okay, and what's UED up to this year? Have you got, what's your next plans on the horizon?
We were planning to do our face-to-face event in March, but we postponed it. We think it's not a good time to have fun and talk together after this earthquake. So we are going to do it in October. We are going to start a few new projects. The first one will be, we are going to arrange webinar, series of webinars to our institutional members. And we're going to save these webinars for the training purpose for the new staff. We are developing a new online training for counselor training webinar program. We need more qualified staff to employ in our offices, and we are having difficulty, and they're having difficulty to find the right person to employ. So we are developing the training program, which will take place in September. And during that, we're gonna do agent training webinars, record them, use them for training purposes. And we are planning to start new sales and marketing trainings for our staff. So we need to update. I mean, the market is changing. After the pandemic, a lot of agencies are suffering with staff. We don't have much staff. And the staff, they just left the jobs or move overseas or move to other jobs. First, biggest problem for us is to get new staff on the agencies to handle the demand.
Okay, thank you. And Jonathan, you mentioned that before the show that QE's got some events coming up very soon. What are these? Tell us about these.
Yes, so we'll be hosting 7 missions, Quality English workshops this year. And the next 2 will be in Tokyo and Taiwan next month, 18th and 21st, I believe, of April. And then we'll be focusing on Latin America in October, which will be Colombia and Brazil. And then we'll be going to Prague straight after ISEF Berlin, and then a short break before we have 2 more missions to Rome, and then the big celebrations in Madrid in late November. So lots of face-to-face events this year, and we're continuing with our online workshops as well, our e-missions.
Great, thank you. We do have a question. Eren, you said you wouldn't need to have an agreement with BPP, so going back to the last story,
Yeah.
to send them students. Does that mean you'd have a sub-agency agreement?
No.
Oh.
The way I'll make it much clearer. For an agency like me to send a student and get commission from the universities, you need an agreement with the university. Without agreement, none of the UK universities or any higher education provider will pay you a commission. But when you have an Oxford International pathway provider between you and the university, your agreement with the pathway provider covers the university agreement. So if I send a student through Oxford International and the student goes to BPP, I still get my commission from the university. Technically, Oxford International collects the commission for me from the university and passes it to me. So that is very essential for many agencies, because some agencies do not have enough number of students to sign up an agreement with a university. And British universities are usually don't want to sign up agreements with all agencies. They just have their UK-focused few agencies in each country, and they're not interested in signing up new agreements. So pathway providers like Oxford International can plan into allow agencies to obtain commission from the higher education side when the student progresses to higher education.
Okay, thank you. That's very interesting. Thank you. And I can't see any other questions. So I think that looks like the end of our audience Q&A, which brings us to the end of this week's StudyTravel TV Live.
Visit the StudyTravel TV Live page on the StudyTravel Network, which you can find under the magazine section in the menu. On that page, we will announce the guest speakers for our next broadcast. You will also be able to find a recording of this broadcast from tomorrow, as well as all past episodes.
So that's it for today. We'd like to say a big thank you to our special guests. Eren, thank you for your time and insights today.
Pleasure to be with you.
And thank you, Jonathan, for joining us again and sharing your thoughts.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
We look forward to seeing you all again very soon.
And thank you again to our sponsor this week, Felka. And thanks to everyone for watching. Goodbye.